Hi, it's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and I'm back again with how I'm using the Easy Saw rotating clamp. New plan. So one of the things that I determined was when I made or sawed through the acrylic adapter that comes with this, and then made the faux bone pieces that were custom to some of my impression dies, I had cut the slits in it to get in from the side, and I ultimately decided that probably wasn't the best way to do it because the material I was using was not very thick. It was stiff but not thick, and so when I put it in the clamps, they kind of had more spring to them than I would have liked. So I was going to try to do this with the faux bone, and then I realized, oh, rather than having to saw the faux bone, if I used metal, I could use some of my dies, my cutting dies, to cut the circle out of the middle. So this is two pieces of metal. It's a copper sheet and a brass sheet underneath, and probably 18 gauge maybe. So it seems pretty thick. It doesn't seem like there's much spring to it. And then I've sandwiched my piece between the two and then stuck that in the regular, as shipped Easy Saw. And so the only thing that this is different is it doesn't have the slit to slide the saw through. So you're going to have to, undo your blade and put it through the middle and saw that way. And again, I still don't have my setup to show me sawing. You probably don't want to sit there and watch and spend the time watching me saw anyway. So I'm going to go off and test this. And when I'm done, I will be back with my impressions of whether this works or not. So back in a few. Okay, I'm back. So this is actually my second attempt. The first time I did it, I forgot to do the internal pieces first, which again with the clamping system isn't that critical because I could go back in and clamp and do the internal pieces. So that wasn't that big a deal. But what I did was I tried to saw down one side and then around, and you can see I actually sawed into the brass and copper pieces holding it, which was I thought would be fine, but it ended up there wasn't enough metal, and so the piece actually started to fall through. So I then left a bridge, which ended up working better on the second side. So this is my second piece, and what I did this time was I clamped it in between the two pieces of metal, sawed down did the internal pieces first, sawed down one side, left a bridge here, undid my saw, redid it on the other side, and then sawed down the other side. So I have a bridge here and a bridge here, and that was able to support the metal. Now, this is very light. It's like a 20 gauge piece of metal that I started with because this design I wanted to make earrings. I already made a pair in pewter, and they're so light. I love them, so I can have long dangle earrings without pulling my ears down. So I wanted to try to do the same thing in copper because I love copper too. So I started with a thinner gauge of metal. And so again, this was a little springier trying to saw. So in general, this concept worked. 4 pieces that I'm going to saw a lot of, I probably will still do the custom shape. So if I go back to the faux bone with the clamps, so here's the adapter with the 2-inch hole, And so the issue with this one is for longer pieces like this, you have to move it a bunch of times, which it's not that big a deal, but it can be a pain, especially because a lot of times I don't have a ton of metal around the impression. And so with the faux bone plate, so I did a video where I made my own adapter kind of things that I then clamped in this out of faux bone, and the faux bone was thick enough I could drill holes into it and use those tiny mini clamps to hold my piece. And I made custom shape for each piece. What I didn't like about those is I cut the slit in. I think I described this in the intro, and that made it kind of bouncy. So this concept works. So I can either go back, remake the faux bone one with the mini clamps, or do, and again, you need 2 pieces of metal. So in this case, I use copper and brass. That doesn't really matter. This piece, the top piece in copper is 20 gauge. I probably would do 18 and 18, but that's what I had kicking around. So either way, you could do it. So if you've got faux bone, and it's nice because it is soft, so it doesn't cushion. So you could either do it the original way I did, where I cut the shape. Again, I wouldn't do the slit. I'd cut a shape and then, just kind of put your blade through as if you were piercing, and then do your sawing. Or if you could take 2 pieces of faux bone, but again, you're going to have to cut it twice and then make it like a clamp. So you could sandwich the piece in between the 2, and then you don't need those screw holes and the little mini clamps. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you didn't watch my faux bone one, you should watch that first. And then you could decide which way you want to do it. If I'm going to do metal, I'll probably do it this way. It's just easier. If I'm going to do faux bone, I can't remember if I've got the thinner one. That's easier to saw. But I might just stay with the way that I did it before, where I used the mini clamps. So anyway, multiple ways that you can use this Easy Saw rotating clamp. I love this thing. I can saw so much more. It used to be I could saw 1, maybe 2 pieces in a day, and then my hand would just hurt like crazy and I'd have to stop. So anyway, just another idea. You can use your Easy Saw with the pieces you are cutting out. Thanks for joining me today. See you next time. So I keep forgetting to mention in my videos about the Easy Saw rotating clamp is it also works really well for filing. So sometimes, especially with the thinner gauge, well, just for me anyway, again, because my hand is always hurting, trying to hold it down even for filing can be a drag. And, keeping it in either the original clamp, the adapter that Easy Saw sells, or one of my little adapters works great, especially when you're trying to get into these internal places. But even for the external, I try to remember to use the clamp and file before I take it out. So anyway, I kept forgetting to mention that. Hope that helps. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Okay, so I was trying to explain this, I think, in the previous clip, but I wanted to show you visually kind of what I was talking about. So these were some of the faux bone plates that I had made. Here's the slit I was talking about that I would not do if I were going to do this again. So these are actually 2 different patterns for different pieces that I have, but I stacked them and it sandwiched this piece nicely. And so I could either clamp, so in this case I just clamped it to the adapter because that's what was on my rotating clamp, or you could stick it in between the original if that's what you got. These are thin, the thin faux bone. So I feel like, I haven't tried it yet, but I feel like it's thin enough that you could probably slide the 2 in between the original with the big hole. But for me, I already had this there, so I just sandwiched the piece I was sawing out between the two shapes, clamped that whole setup to the adapter, and it worked great. I don't know if you can see, I've sawed this side so far. And so what I do have to do is I have to thread through openings as if I was doing piercing rather than coming in through the side, because I didn't want to have to use the slits, and this way I can clamp them down and it's a little sturdier. So hopefully that all makes sense. Thanks for joining me again. See you next time. Hi, just a quick update. So I talked about updating if sandwiching a piece between two pieces of the faux bone and putting it in the original Easy Saw rotating clamp works, and it does. I will say this is a little more fiddly even than doing it with the adapter with the screws and clamps. But what I ended up doing was I just taped the whole sandwich together to keep it the way that I wanted it, and then slid the whole thing into the Easy Saw. So saw it out all in one shot. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.